So the question is, are we in a simulation? So first, let's figure out what is needed for a simulation this big. We need high computing power. So PC go brrrr. Okay, the reason we need a high computing power is of course because we are simulating everything. So we need to simulate a lot of things and a lot of things. If everything is simulated, for example, like the atoms, inside the atoms, the electrons, if they are all simulated, then we need tons of computing power, which is not possible to have. It's a lot of computing power, basically. So simulating everything, not possible. So how about if we just simulate the people? Just simulate the people in their mind. So when they are looking at a table, you don't have to simulate all the particles, because then you will simulate everything. We only simulate the things that are being observed. This really eases the computing power and makes it possible. Considering that our computing power increases every 2 years, like double or even more sometimes, this high computing power is achievable. That's one of the arguments that Elon Musk had it. Like, if you look at 10 years ago, we had like fucking ping pong shitty games. Now we have 3D real-time shit that is like so hard complex. We have like 3080s. Imagine them in like 100 years. Imagine the 3080 there. So actually the computing power for at least classical computers, they improve a lot, but it's more like a logarithmic one. So after some time, we won't really increase it that much. There's gonna be quantum computers, and maybe after that we'll find even newer computers. So I think high computing power is achievable. I believe so. Then if you have enough computing power to simulate, we need to understand the building blocks, right? No, that's completely wrong. Because the reason we simulate stuff is to understand the building. So what you basically do, you set the environment, you run the simulation, and then you see bugs. And then you fix the bugs, then you stumble upon a discovery. That's what we do currently on the chemical simulations, at least.
So we don't really understand all the building blocks. But of course, we need some understanding in order to set the environment.
Another argument, in computers, memory is limited. Simply, there is no thing such as unlimited memory. So if you're in a simulation, there is no way something that is
infinite.
And in nature, we don't really see that, except space, as we know, is still growing and it's gonna continue grow. They say that it might come back and collapse on it slowly, but yeah, whatever. So space is technically infinite, but space is right now, as it is, limited. So if at some point when space stops growing and it just stucks there, or like it collapses back, then knowing that there's nothing infinite in the universe might be an argument for a simulation. Let's now continue with that thing. Limits. So we have limits in memory, right? So what are the limits that we see around us? The most basic one, the one that everyone knows, speed of light, of course. So that's interesting, and it's like a main force of the universe. So of course it's gonna have a limit, and we're gonna see it if you're in a simulation. It's a good argument. Another limit, it's the maximum temperature that you can get. We don't really know about this, but particle energies become so large that gravitational forces between them would become as strong as fundamental forces according to the current theories. There is no existent scientific theory for behavior of matter of these energies. So we have no fucking idea what happens after that temperature. It says like a quantum theory of gravity would be required. So as we know, the maximum temperature is that. So what's the smallest thing that we can measure then? What's the smallest distance that we can measure? Yeah, we have that. That is called Planck length, which is 1.6 10 to the minus 35 meters. And let's say our smallest thing in our simulation, smallest distance, is 0.1 multiplied by 10 to 35. We say it because instead of 1.6, basically we are getting 0.1 of it, because that's the smallest thing. And considering that, then what's the smallest temperature that we can measure?
The most accurate temperature measurement in the world, it's around 0.0001 Kelvin. And it is a bit disappointing compared to the smallest distance we can measure.
But now considering that the maximum Kelvin that we can measure, and considering that the minimum Kelvin that we can measure, we get basically the limit of temperature. Considering the smallest amount of measurement that we can make is around 2.416, blah blah blah, 10 to power 36. And look at it, it's actually 10 to power 36, and the other is 10 to power negative 36. Can you believe that? It has the same exponential. Of course, we don't know if this Planck length is the minimum amount of distance actually possible. And of course, we don't know if this temperature is the maximum amount of temperature and if this accuracy is the minimum amount of accuracy that we can get out of a temperature. Of course. But if we assume that our technology, both of the temperature accuracy and the distance accuracy grow at the same speed, this is really surprising to see that both of these numbers being so close. And this is a good argument of simulation, because basically there are different types of variable with different amounts of memory allowed. And of course, if when you're simulating something, you will use the same variable types. So assuming that they have the same variable types, they will have the same amount of memory allocated for them. And they are so close. I mean, they are not so close actually. They look close, but they are not so close. But thinking that we are not sure about this Planck length and these temperatures anyways, they are close. Not only we have limited things, for example, the speed of light, the max temperature that we can get, it's also that to the level of accuracy that we can measure these, they have kind of the same, at least same amount of decimal digits. Yeah, it's epic. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about the observing part of it. So basically, as we observe, it is simulated. A big proof of this is basically quantum. So quantum particles, before we observe them, we don't really know what they are doing. We have high probabilities of what they are doing, but we don't really know. For example, in an atom, we know that an electron is around there with 90% probability. 90 or like 99, whatever. But before we measure it, we don't really know where it is. So it might not be simulated precisely before we observe it. So it might have like some level of simulation there, so that it shows that, okay, so we simulate right now, act like the electron is there, around there. Since the electron is really fast and you don't want to simulate every move of the electron, there's like a level of simplification to get rid of the computing power. But the moment you observe it, pop, you see the electron wherever it was. And it's a collapse of the state, which might be just like a collapse of the simulation. Basically, the nature's random number generator. Okay, stupid argument. Now I'm gonna give a stupid argument. Bugs. Every simulation, all of them, will have bugs. We'll see some bugs. Maybe when we find bugs, the world got restarted because they are so clean. But maybe the world just continued with the bugs. So how about this? We used to think that the sun was going around the world, right? What if it was actually going around the world? And then it was a bug. The simulators realized, holy shit, this doesn't make sense, guys. This doesn't make sense. Who coded this shit? And then they did a hotfix. All of a sudden, whoop, Earth is around the sun. Yeah, this makes sense. Yeah. Looks legit. Looks legit. And then everyone's like, yeah. So there are also other bugs. For example, gravity. We don't really know how it works in small scales, what the fuck it does. Maybe it's a bug. Maybe it's not implemented actually. Maybe it's just like a random shit happens there. It throws some errors, but still keeps running the program. It keeps running the simulation. Or quantum stuff. It doesn't really, it's not really a bug, and it doesn't really break the physics as we know. Although we created a little bit I don't want to say created a new physics for it, but kinda created a new physics for it. Although we understand it and we can predict it, at least for me it doesn't really make sense. So maybe it's a bug. Maybe it's just like,
yeah, oopsie doopsie. Oh, they found quantum? They go small? Oh shit, man. Okay. Somebody gotta hotfix this, or we're gonna restart the project. And considering that it's been running for how many hours now? It's ran for 8 hours. Let's just do the hotfix, man. Come on. Can you just fix it in a few minutes? Just add, just make it random.
And then they fixed it, and then we are like, oh shit, man, this actually works. A stupid argument. This is a complete stupid argument. Just have fun with it. I don't know. This argument I realize is bad. So, are we in a simulation? What are the arguments? Let's go over summary. Summary time. So that we have limits. C, the speed of light, and the maximum temperature we have, and the way we calculated, they were really close. The max variable of temperature and distance was really close. I agree, they are not really close, but they have the same exponential. Another argument is, of course, observing to get around the computing power. When we observe, stuff is getting simulated. This makes sense. And we see some kind of behavior like that in quantum physics, which might be a good argument for simulation. And third argument, the stupid one, bugs. XD. Maybe we just saw some bugs. What the hell? Is it not possible? And lastly, I want to touch on this. I think Elon Musk said this. So if you are not in a simulation, it's likely that it is not possible to create a simulation. I don't agree with this. The reason is, if I'm a simulator, if I create a simulation, I wouldn't want my simulation to run a simulation on itself.
It's running a simulation inside a simulation and inside a simulation. Kill me.
It's just not efficient. Like, I would code so that it's not possible to run a simulation inside a simulation. Or it's just simply, okay, my simulation started running simulation on itself. Oh, nice. Let's just stop them and run their simulation on our hardware. Why run their simulation along with the simulation that they create? Except, of course, if I was expecting such a simulation, like if I wanted to observe my simulation running a simulation, of course I would let it go. But at that point, didn't I saw what I already wanted to? So wouldn't you just close the simulation and run a new simulation? But yeah, this is a little bit fuzzy. Although I don't agree with this statement, we have no way of knowing why, if we're in a simulation, why would the simulator run this simulation? We have no way, like, what's his motive? How much computing power does it have? So these are factors that can change this fact. But generally speaking, if I'm running a simulation, I wouldn't like to run a simulation inside a simulation. So in summary, are we in a simulation? Nobody fucking knows. They have really good arguments, really solid arguments. And honestly, God existing, isn't it same as simulation? So I don't really find the appeal of this simulation scenario. So the people who believe in simulation actually believe in a God too then. Maybe they believe in multiple gods, but yeah. So if you're an atheist and you believe in simulation, you need to think about your way of thinking, man. Because it doesn't work like that. The simulator is literally your god if you're in a simulation. And I just want to say it, I'm no big brain. All this stuff I just Googled, no scientific shit whatsoever. I Googled, the first numbers came up, I copy paste, bam bam. I calculated the shit, maybe I did a calculation mistake, maybe the variables that I calculated is not even those variables. Maybe I made a calculation mistake. But yeah, just take it with a grain of salt. This is not anyway scientific. It just makes you think. Just know that, just get blown away about the idea that we have limits, just like we would have if we were in a simulation. And those limits are quite close, as we know right now. That's kind of epic.